Hey guys, it's Dr. Tim Jackson with the Boss Body Podcast. And today we have another very special guest with us, Mr. Wade Lightheart. Wade Lightheart is an advisor to the American Anti-Cancer Institute and three-time all-natural bodybuilding champion, despite his lousy genetics and vegetarian diet. He studied exercise physiology and nutrition at the University of New Brunswick. As a coach and the president and co-founder of BiOptimizers, he has helped over 50,000 people achieve bio-optimized health for the last 25 years. Welcome, Wade.
Great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I mean, your products always over deliver in my experience, the ones that I've tried. And no, I don't own a portion of the company. I'm here to tell my patients and clients and listeners about good products. But you and I were having a conversation off camera. So I've been a recreational weightlifter, never competitive like yourself, but I've noticed that, being fit and being healthy are often two very different things. Would you agree?
It was a discovery that I made post my first Mr. Universe in 2003. And so to backtrack, it took me 16 years to win a national championship and be able to compete at the world championship level. And I would say that I can get to the world championship level, but usually I'm a so-so world caliber athlete. You're just dealing with a different set of genetics when you're dealing with people, but it's fun to go there. But after I did the Mr. Universe contest the first time, I gained 42 pounds of fat and water in 11 weeks after that contest. I went from Mr. Universe to Mr. Marshmallow. And luckily, I ran into a guy by the name of Dr. Michael O'Brien, who you can read about him in Bernard Jensen's Come Alive book. He was instrumental in the recovery of Dr. Jensen from cancer and nervous, actually paralysis. And he had also recovered from cirrhosis of the liver and cancer himself. And he had an idea around the microbiome, enzymatic activity, particular minerals. And he was the picture of health. He was in his late 70s. He was just a super vibrant individual, maybe one of the healthiest individuals I've ever met in my life. So upon attending his seminar, I went, listen, Dr. O'Brien, I'm at the peak level of fitness and cosmetic. And let's look, bodybuilding is a cosmetic sport. You look a certain way, and we associate that with health. It's a relative level of high performance fitness with low body fat levels, but it's not healthy. And I had discovered that. And he told me something that changed my life. He said, Wade, you've learned to build the body from the outside in. I'm going to teach you how to build the body from the inside out. Well, Matt and I, after attending his professional seminar, we went all in and did his program. And 6 months later, I had regained my physical condition, but I had a new level of energy and vitality and kind of a new lens to look at combining high performance with extraordinary health. And we really have a model, I think, that's pervasive in the athletic world, but that also trickles into the general population, is that fitness, which is your ability to produce work relative to a given sport or a set of parameters that you define. It's okay if I sacrifice my health for that performance mechanism. We also see that carry forward in the executive community. As long as I can keep the company going, it doesn't matter if I'm 100 pounds overweight or whatever it happens to be. And of course, we often cut short our performance as long with our health in the long term. Mm-hmm. And so Matt and I got into the idea of, well, how do we have healthy, high performance, not just for the short term, but creating an arc where we hit our peak level of fitness and health, carrying forward for an extended period of time. And that's why we started our company way back in 2004. And we got into this idea and thought it was an exciting area. And through that journey over almost 2 decades now, we've been able to discover a lot of nuances. We had a tremendous amount of failures in that, we might add. And now we've had enough success that we've been able to really lean on, the intellectual PhD class to be able to prove the efficacy and to help us build better products and provide the nuanced information that the public demands in order to have that. And so that's been our journey.
Yeah, that's an incredible story. And the fact that you guys started in 2004, I was just starting to kind of dabble in this world in 2004, reading wise, and starting to implement some things into my life. But yeah, I mean, I went from 129 pounds when I was a senior in high school in 1999 to 186 pounds at the end of my freshman year of college. Some of that was pizza and beer, but most of it was weightlifting and protein shakes. And it was just, getting after it 5 to 6 days a week. And, when you're 18, you can recover from pretty much anything.
Right.
Not to mention the fact that, you go to class for a couple hours, then you're basically done. I mean, except for studying. And so I realized that I had to, figure out a better approach to my fitness goals because, yeah, I could get to my fitness goals, but I might sacrifice health along the way.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I think that's the biggest thing that I learned back, when I was 31, is that, wait a second, I felt like garbage the last 6 months preparing for that Mr. Universe. 4 years later with the new stuff, I came back, did better at the World Championships and felt better and didn't have the rebound after. And then recently, with all the adjuncts, I went back to the World Championships again at 50 and felt better than I did in either one of the previous ones and achieved a physical condition from a body fat perspective that was superior to than those earlier events. So what we're discovering is that, yeah, I'm not going to be 25-year-old again. I'm not going to have that ability. But with all of these adjuncts that we're able to put into the mix in a sequential and strategic manner, we can have a really high level of performance, health, and vitality all in one using this technology. And that's what we advocate. It's why we give away our courses. That's why we have the Sick to Superhuman books and all that sort of stuff to show people that, yeah, you can do this too, and you can extend your healthy, high-performing self a lot longer than previously thought.
Absolutely. And so we know digestion is so important for a multitude of reasons. It seems like the list is constantly getting longer. It used to be month by month. Now I think it's day by day, pretty much. But you talk about the 5 stages of digestion a great deal. Can you touch on that?
Yeah. So the first stage is our sensory stage, which is the taste, touch, smell, feel the food. We have sensory organs that will actually, through the smell and taste of a food, start to prepare the body to move into that. Now, I will say there's a lot of evidence that shows that if you are in a relaxed state of being, that's not watching TV, that's not stressed out or overstimulated, then you will have improved digestion. So you should be in the rest and relax stage from a nervous system perspective. But these taste and sensing and feeling, which is interesting, in the West, the foods that are consumed or enjoyed the most are finger foods, if you think about it: French fries, hamburgers, pizzas, things that you actually touch. Now, in India, they understand that interrelation, but it's something that's not as well understood here. And so that's an interesting component, but that kind of prepares the body. Your body will start producing enzymes or getting the digestive system ready. When you masticate the food or chew up your food, how well you do that is also a precursor to your digestive process. You're breaking down the bigger fibers or whatever it is that you're consuming. Your body's releasing some enzymes right in the mouth, particularly around carbohydrates, and the food will travel down your esophagus into the upper cardiac portion of the stomach. Now, you've got about 30 to 60 minutes that food is going to sit in there. And this is where the enzymes present in the food are supposed to be activating on the food. Now, unfortunately, for human beings, most of us cook our food, or food has been pasteurized or irradiated. We're the only species on the planet that does that. And now the benefits of being able to store large amounts of food and to cook food and to sterilize food are obviously obvious in alleviating starvation, which is, the number one killer of humans throughout history. However, there are drawbacks to that, and that is it puts an enzymatic demand on our body. In fact, our pancreas in humans is almost 4 times larger per body weight than any other species, because we have to produce more enzymes, store more enzymes, in particular around refined carbohydrates. After the 30, 60 minutes, the food drops down into the lower half of the stomach. And by this time, hydrochloric acid is being released by the body. Now, hydrochloric acid serves 2 specific purposes. Hydrochloric acid, number 1, kills the bugs, bacteria, viruses, parasites, flies, whatever happens to be in that food. The idea of high hydrochloric levels will break that down. The second thing that hydrochloric acid does is begins to change the pH of the food. That will deactivate some enzymes and activate others as the pH begins to drop. Upon completion of that, your body releases what's called bicarbonate buffers, a fancy name for minerals. And those minerals will buffer the acids before the food goes into your intestinal tract. In the intestinal tract, you have what I call good, bad, and ugly. 10% good, 10% bad, and about 80% opportunists. These are the various bacteria cultures. And this is the part that I think a lot of us who grew up and, kind of got those public health films in the 70s and 80s and stuff, bacteria was something that needed to be killed and annihilated at all costs. And there's some truth to that. Bad bacteria can kill you, can cause disease, can cause infection, can cause a lot of problems in the body. And that's where our medical innovations around antibiotics have worked very well. However, when you take an antibiotic, it doesn't distinguish between the bad bacteria that cause sickness and the good bacteria, which are essential to health. And the reality is we live in a symbiotic relationship with these bacteria. In fact, there's good evidence to suggest we're actually not feeding ourselves when we eat. We're feeding the bacteria, right. And those bacteria are producing the energy units in building blocks, the metabolites that allow us to live a healthy life. And a disruption in what's called our microbiome, which is the total amount of bacteria in our body, the different cultures and how they grow and are essential to that, will determine your state of health, the functioning of your immune system, whether you feel bloated after a meal, whether your number 2s are good or bad or ugly, whether you have constipation or all these different things that come up in the digestive system. And then the final stage is, defecation, where you're removing all the waste material from whatever you've extracted from your food. And if you look at where people run into problems in the digestion system, number 1, they don't properly chew or break down their food to start. Number 2, they have, so they don't have enough enzymes present to break that food down. Number 2, they don't, and there's some tests for this. For example, I'll get into the tests in a second. Number 2, they don't produce enough hydrochloric acid. And what's the number 1 things? It's interesting. Acid reflux, heartburn. These are things oftentimes that are related with not enough hydrochloric acid. And of course, the treatments are give you antacids, but it's actually the inverse of that. And then number 3, that they feel bloating and gas afterwards, or constipation or diarrhea. Well, that's usually a disruption in the microbiome. An easy way to test for this. So if you take some lemon or lime juice, a couple tablespoons after a meal, if you feel that it's a smoother digestion, chances are you need more enzymes. If to test your hydrochloric acid, just take a half teaspoon of baking soda and put it in 4 ounces of water, stir it up, drink it on an empty stomach. If you burp within 5 minutes, you got enough hydrochloric acid. If you don't, you're probably not producing enough. And number 3, the best way to check your gut microbiome is to do a stool sample with a naturopathic doctor or someone with a functional medicine, a doctor who can break down and start showing you the relationship. And you're going to need a few months in order to really optimize your bacteria culture, particularly if you've been subjected to a lot of antibiotics, a lot of medications, or the standard American diet. And that's really it in a nutshell of all the digestive issues. We address every single one of them as a company, and that's why we have such a loyal following around the world, because we probably do that better than anyone else.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for explaining the 5 steps of the digestive process. I think a lot of people believe we just kind of chew and there's stomach acid and that's kind of it. But in terms of stool testing, I've been doing stool testing since 2009, and it's evolved and we've learned more and new technologies come about. But one thing I've noticed time and time again, no matter what products someone is using, if they're in a fight or flight state or sympathetic dominant state, they might see marginal changes, but it won't really move the needle.
Yeah, I mean, for example, I saw some research, oh, this was over a decade ago. If you go through an extremely stressful situation, like a car accident or even a close call where you get that hyper dump of adrenaline,
Right.
its impact on the microbiome can literally wipe out whole cultures of bacteria. There was another interesting study, one of the Ivy League universities, one of the professors put his son on a fast food diet for 30 days, and he lost about half of the bacteria cultures in his son lost half of the bacteria culture because his son loved fast food and he wanted to demonstrate this wasn't good for him. And it was shocking both to the professor and his son, obviously.
Wow.
Led to some lifestyle interventions. So don't underestimate stress and what you're eating for food. And unfortunately, a lot of people eat in a stressful situation. And I'll share with you a great observation point. Go to the theater, sit in the back row, make it a movie that you're not that interested in, and watch people as the drama builds up. You'll see this anticipation, and on the release of that drama, you'll see people eat and drink a lot of the food. And then another experiment you can do is take one of those big popcorns that they have at the theater, go buy it, sit outside without watching the movie, and try to eat the box of popcorn. It's difficult, but you can just gobble this down in an unconscious way as a stress response to the system, because we're used to having almost like either exercising, fighting off an animal or whatever. That's how we evolved, and then we get the reward of food after. What they're doing is creating an artificial stressful situation. Then we're eating after it, and that's not optimal for our health and vitality.
Right. Absolutely. I mean, I've read studies where specific bacteria in the microbiome have receptors for adrenaline and noradrenaline. And so right there, you have a connection, not to mention the decrease in secretory IgA, which polices our mucosal lining, which I know you're familiar with, but our listeners, in case you haven't heard it before. So let's dive in and talk about some of the things you've learned over the years in terms of the most common problems that arise in digestion. I mean, you mentioned low stomach acid, low enzymes. What else have you seen?
Well, the biggest thing I would say, and outside of, I'll give one caveat on a physiological level. Sometimes digestive issues can be an innervation problem with peristaltic contractions. People that have spinal injuries, dislocated disc or whatever, you can shut off the activation of peristaltic contraction or create pressure points, particularly if you sit a lot. I always say getting a good evaluation of that, whether you're getting an innervation, could be an issue. But outside of that, if you look at most of the immune response problems, it's undigested proteins leaking into the blood. The crap is literally going into the system. And that's caused by a breakdown in the mucosal lining at the cells. And I think it was Harvard just came out with a study recently that, this was poo-pooed 20 years ago.
Right.
But now it said that almost everyone in North America is suffering from some level of what's called leaky gut. In other words, that you are getting undigested food particles entering into the blood. Your body sees this as a threat and begin attacking the particles, and that's what it's designed to do. But it creates an inflammatory based condition that is perpetual. And so sometimes, and how do you realize that? Well, we all know what it's like to go out at the buffet or eating a late night meal, and you wake up in the morning really tired and really groggy, get the crusty eyes, maybe your breath is bad, dark circles under the eyes. these are indications that you have undigested food leaking into the system that are feeding these bad bacteria and producing all sorts of neurotoxins like indole and skadol and things like that. That should be a sign. The other thing is one of the more popular areas that's come to light recently is fasting. Well, what is the reason fasting works? Well, oftentimes you'll starve off the bad guys and allow proliferation of the good guys. And so that's a big thing. The amount of fiber a person gets in their diet will determine how well you feed some of those good bacteria strains. So ensuring that you have sufficient amount of fibers, what we've tested with most of the positive probiotics, the good guy bacteria, is that fiber is a preferred food. It also increases satiety and makes weight management much easier for most people. And if you are having trouble with fiber in your diet, you need to really get a functional medicine doctor to really get it, because you probably got some severe complications going on, and you're going to need some interventions with specific medical expertise. So those are some of the big brand things. Acid reflux and heartburn, almost everyone will benefit if they're over the age of 30, 35 to using hydrochloric acid after a meal. Just take a capsule of HCl. It's great. Proteolytic enzymes seem to be the most potent, although I would say that if you're looking at digestive enzymes, get a digestive enzymes that is concordant with the diet that you're eating. So Masszymes was kind of an all-in-one enzyme that we built. However, we developed a Capex, which is based for ketogenic diets. We got a Vegzymes for plant-based diets. We developed a Gluten Guardian, which was for if you're going to eat gluten or you're going to be in a gluten environment, hey, you can get the dipeptidyl peptidase 4, which is in Gluten Guardian, to break that down. You really want to make sure that whatever you're eating, you're breaking that down in that first 30 to 60 minutes of your digestion. Get your hydrochloric acid, and then really have a potent probiotic that's going to enhance your microbiome. P3OM, there's 6 basic tests that people can, researchers do on the efficacy of bacteria, what it attacks, what it does, how it lives, how it survives. P3OM, that bacteria, has outperformed every single probiotic strain we've tested. We've tested several hundred now in the labs. And we call it the Navy SEALs of probiotics. It just seems to be able to overcome so many conditions. And it's a complement to other bacteria strains in that it beats down the bad guys and lets the good guys proliferate. So it's a good standalone probiotic. But of course, getting with a functional medicine doctor, doing your stool test are going to give you the best options. We've developed other probiotic strains as well. But again, that's where you want specialized expertise, and it's worth the investment. It'll transform your life.
Yeah, I've been able to help a lot of people who are maybe taking enzymes, but don't necessarily need them, or taking, butyrate or something else, oxbile, don't necessarily need it, because if you can dial in and be a little more nuanced in your approach, that information and knowledge will save you money in the long term. You mentioned, well, I don't know if you said the term, but saccharolytic fermentation, the production of butyrate, acetate, and propionate. A lot of people, they get upset when I tell them that, high fat, high protein diet may not be the best for their microbiome long term. And I don't mean go out and drink a bunch of Gatorade, but the point is that you need fruits and vegetables.
Yeah, this is one of the interesting conversations. Of course, my business partner is a ketogenic advocate, and he introduces carbohydrates on once a week into his diet. And I'm a plant-based guy. So we've been in this discussion for literally 2 decades. But I think what's fascinating right now, and I want to qualify this, I am not a dietary tribalist. I think that every diet has advantages and liabilities. So a diet, an elimination diet that's reducing, some sort of challenge that you might be facing in the short term may produce those benefits. And I'll give you an example specific. I'll give you 2 opposing arguments. So a number of years ago, little over 15 years ago, I was a member of the raw food community. I ate nothing but raw food for 2 years. And what I noticed is there was a lot of people who had a lot of illness switched to a raw food diet, which is essentially a form of an elimination diet.
Right.
And they got all of these benefits from the raw food diet, which they associated with it. And then, but one of the things I noticed is there wasn't a lot of people that were really athletic or carried a lot of muscle or things like that. And in my own journey, I found that at about 2 years in, that it was really hard for me to maintain the amount of muscle and output that I wanted to do. And so I made alterations to that diet and moved away from the raw food diet. Now, concordantly, if we look at someone else like Dr. Jordan Peterson and his daughter, Michaela Peterson, who have a rare genetic condition that causes hyperinflammation from carbohydrates and anything like that, which had massive problems with their cognitive health. She had entire degenerative conditions. They switched to an all meat diet, which is really boring and probably pretty sucky to adhere to. But they had massive transformations in their health and vitality. Literally, his daughter was going to die. Peterson himself suffered extraordinarily from these things, and they made those switches, and they've got those benefits. Now, are they creating problems in the long term? Could they reintroduce other things? Probably, but I would say the legitimate fear about reintroducing. So did their carnivore diets reduce the inflammatory components that was causing the problems? Likely, but that doesn't necessarily mean that's going to be success over the long term, same as the raw food people. And now we see a lot of the carnivore people moving out of hardcore carnivore into mostly carnivore diets. And so the pendulum always swings back and forth. And I think for people who are looking at this, avoid the tribalism, get specifics, understand your genetics, understand the factors that are influencing you, whether you have an overgrowth of bacteria, whether you have infections or inflammatory conditions, maybe some genetic predispositions that make it more difficult for you or better for you for one diet or another. And the only way you can do that is to hire an expert like yourself that is going to be able to take you through this, walk you through this, and get you out of the tribalistic mentality that, oh, it's only this diet or only that diet, because the results are, well, one thing we do know, 96% of people who begin in a diet end up gaining more weight than when they lost. So that tells me that that strategy of moving to a dietary fad is flawed. And therefore, we want to abandon that and start using science and expertise to determine what diet is best for you at a given time, but be flexible enough that you can emerge into different dietary strategies at different times, which is probably more concordant with our human history, with the seasons.
And I think that resonates with a lot of people, especially clinicians like myself, because you're not locked into one dietary dogma. You're trying to meet people where they are and maybe just plant some seeds, and then what they do with the information, is up to them. And I think there's a lot to be said for that. So let's talk about protein powders, because I know I don't even want to know what was in the whey protein shakes from GNC that I took in college. I mean, it's probably enough to kill a small army. But how do you see not just supplement industry, but more specifically the protein shake industry?
Well, I've been around since the early years of Joe Weider, when they're selling you mostly sugar and just like recycled, hen's claws and pork skin, the old hydrolyzed proteins and stuff. It was really bad stuff. Nothing mixed up. It tasted horrible. And they had, the top bodybuilders in the world saying, hey, you need this. And you had the Mega Mass 4000, I think, is when it really just hit the end of the road of that. It should have been called Mega Gas 4000. Yeah. But so let's break down the concept of increased protein. There is significant amount of evidence that an increased amount of quality protein to a certain point will improve outcomes for lean body mass and food satiety. Okay, the ability to adhere to a dietary philosophy that doesn't consume more calories than you burn. And I think that's pretty strong of a high protein diet. If you look at, you go to an average bodybuilding contest, let's give you an example. Regardless of the genetics of the contestants or predispositions, virtually everybody gets into a fairly low body fat percentage by following a high protein and regular exercise. So that would indicate that that's probably a strong suit. Now, many of those people augment their diets with proteins, and there's a lot of different camps on which protein is best or what you should need. And for me, it was a big challenge because I was a plant-based guy. Most plant-based proteins taste like dirt and smell like a barn. And then when you get into the animal-based proteins, you get a wide variance in the quality, whether you're using an isolate or whether you're using a concentrate. If you're doing whey proteins, is there contaminants in that whey protein? Are you bolstering it with collagen? Are you getting bovine extracts from it? Are you using a casein protein? Or are you starting to use these kind of hybrid hydrolyzed proteins that may be a very low quality sources? And then there's, egg, and then there's, the various plant types. So we've got this mishmash of proteins. And what I would suggest to people is this: always defer to getting your protein from real food if possible. The cleaner that food is, biodynamic, organic, grass-fed, whatever that happens to be, that's usually your best choice. Now, as busy people, it's very difficult to get that. And that's where I think protein shakes could come in really handy to stabilize blood sugar and to support a sensible exercise regimen for weight management and exercise. And we have to do that nowadays because we just live such sedentary lifestyles. 150 years ago, living was exercise. Now we have to actually physically do it. So when you're looking at a protein, I would evaluate this. Number one, when you drink it, does it taste good? Because if it doesn't taste good, you're not going to do it regularly. Number two, what is your digestibility? Do you feel bloated? Do you get acid reflux after? Does it disrupt your stools? Like, do you get a lot of gas, a lot of bloating? Do you get the runs, or do you get constipated? Track which protein causes those problems for you. Always defer. If you're going to use a whey protein, I think it's good to defer to a grass-fed or hormone-free, because when you start adding hormones, we don't know what disruptors might be involved in that. Start with a little, find your optimal dosage. I think most people use way too much program. You don't need 50 grams in a serving. Usually 25 to 30 will be enough. And then look at the additives in it. I think where a lot of the problems comes is the emulsifiers, the dyes or coloring agents, some of the artificial food components. These elements, basically, when it's things that you cannot pronounce is in the ingredients, chances are that's not a high quality product. So the simpler, the better. Use it as an augmentation to your diet, and then find which works best for you. For a lot of people now, if they have a high meat diet, they'll substitute with a plant-based diet. For some people who are on a high plant-based diet, they'll add a whey protein because they have a harder time. And again, be flexible and find the product that's right for you. Remove as many additives or agents that don't make sense, or those emulsifiers or agents that kind of bloat you up, and you'll do really well on using your proteins. And don't be afraid to experiment.
Absolutely. And so in your bodybuilding journey or journeys, have you, the dogma that I kind of hear, I guess that's the correct term, dogma, is 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight. Has that
Yeah.
been your experience or no?
Well, that's what most people will use. And I think the advantage of that, particularly when it comes to, leaning out, is more from a satiety as it is from a physiological function.
Gotcha.
And on a plant-based, so I've had the unique experience of having all this success in bodybuilding per se on a plant-based diet, which is very odd. It's not common, but I think when you have certain restrictions, you learn nuances. So to give you an example, I'll train literally 6 days a week in preparation for my most recent contest. And over the course of 18 months on calorie restriction that I used in this preparation, I never lost a single pound of lean body mass, okay, under calorie restriction. At 50 years old, there's no TRT, there's no hormone manipulation, there's no anabolic steroids, there's no growth hormone, no insulin, no anticatabolics, no any of those other things that are involved in that process. So I'm speaking from experience, not from theory. I was including approximately 120 grams of protein a day. That would be between 100 and 120 grams was where I'm topping out. My lean body mass is around just under 160 pounds of lean body mass. Okay, that's going to be a combination of bone, muscle, and organs. Okay, so if you look at that, that's about 0.7, 0.8 grams of protein a day to support the lean body mass. So when I started my diet, I had 40 pounds of fat to lose. And you can look at, and this is on a DEXA scan, and I want to break this down for people. Your body fat percentage and your lean body mass, particularly on most of those tests, are going to fluctuate with hydration and the amount of carbohydrates that you've eaten, which are going to plump up your muscles, literally. So you have glycogen loading inside your muscles. And I've seen variances as much as 8 pounds when I do a carbohydrate spike in a 24-hour period on lean body mass readings. When you're tracking this, track your body fat, total body fat. That's the element that you want to see continually going down without an overall average loss in lean body mass. So those are the two elements that you're tracking, and your body fat percentage will will regulate depending on those hydration levels. And over the course of those 18 months, I took my body fat down to 14 pounds of body fat on my body at that time. So that's what I ended up competing at. And so that was 26 pounds over 18 months. So that gives you an idea, and that's working at this really hard at 50 years old, non-augmented. Doing that faster, I think, is a mistake. I think if you're looking at a long-term strategy for dieters, try to lose 1 to 2 pounds of body fat consistently every month. That way you don't get into super calorie restriction where you start releasing the hormones that make you hungry over time. You get used to that, you stabilize it. But the key element is this: fiber. The reason I was able to do that and maintain calorie restriction is that I have an exorbitant amount of fiber in my diet with every one of those meals. Big salads, lots of fibrous vegetables. I use beans and legumes in concordance with, I use my plant-based protein breakthrough as my protein supplement of choice. So the fiber content will offset a total amount of protein that's intake, and that'll keep the satiety high. And the protein satiety, and that's your feeling of hunger or fullness, that's the key element for long-term body fat reduction, in my opinion.
Yeah, it's interesting that you say that, because from everything I know, it's not necessarily high protein diets that are bad. It's the absence of bioflavonoids, fiber, and polyphenols.
Correct. And so you can, and if so you're going down that route, with every diet, that's where I think supplementation comes in. You want to supplement the aspects of whatever dietary choice that you're missing inside your diet. So if you can do that, then you can have success with a wide ranges of diets. And of course, individuality. So for example, I don't metabolize fats very well, so I need to be very conscientious about getting enough lipolytic enzymes, as well as a really high quality plant-based essential fatty acid, because it's not as prominent in the foods that I'm going to eat. Vitamin C, my body metabolizes vitamin C at a really high level. So, you know, a couple thousand milligrams a day is like someone else taking maybe 8,000. So understanding these genetic nuances that are, you know, concordant with your body, and this is where someone like you can come in and help someone, then you're going to start to see, oh, well, I'm different than my spouse. I'm different than my kids. And now you're not into, you know, the these and thous and do's and do nots of some dietary, you know, religion. You're actually applying science and specificity to you. And that way you don't have to condemn other people for what they're doing. You just need to advocate for yourself and what's right for you.
Yeah, I was just talking with a physician's assistant yesterday, and she was saying how she had a husband and wife that she had both of them wearing a continuous glucose monitor, and they both ate an apple, and the wife's blood sugar didn't go up very much. The husband's went way up. And so here he is thinking he's doing something healthy, but in actuality, he's creating more inflammation.
Yeah, it's like we were just, so here's another piece. I do very well on carbohydrates, unlike my business partner who doesn't do that well on carbohydrates. We were doing a continuous glucose monitoring testing with a HOMO-IR test, which is one of the standards. And when my doctor reviewed my labs, he's like, it looks like you're on a ketogenic diet. And I'm like, I'm eating carbs with every meal.
Wow.
Because I had figured out what carbohydrates, what proteins, what my body metabolizes really well over my experience. My blood sugar stays nice and low, nice and stable with no problems. Some people are eating, ketogenic diets, and they're experiencing bigger fluctuations on their diet because that might not be the right diet for them.
Right. Right. Well, that's awesome. So I know you've told us an incredible amount of information and given us an incredible amount of knowledge on how to fix and eliminate different digestive issues, gas, bloating, heartburn. Tell us the truth about enzymes and probiotics. So enzymes, what's the variation across the market? We see, you know, a certain number of units, you know,
Yep.
on the enzyme supplements. Can you talk about that briefly?
Well, that's become super complicated, by the way. You see these, huts, and, each one has a different unit. Basically, you're determining how much or how efficacious that a given enzyme will break down material that they're testing. And there's these standardized tests at an international level that regulates that. When it comes to protein, and I think that's the most important enzyme, it seems to be around that. You want to look at how many huts it has. But the other thing is you can categorize enzymes into several different categories. There's plant-based enzymes, which are extracts from plants. There are animal-based enzymes, which are extracts from plants. And then there's what's called cultured enzymes. And cultured enzymes are enzymes which are developed inside a lab conditions, usually from various types of funguses and things like that, which are grown under specific conditions. Those cultured enzymes can be 100 to 1,000 times more powerful than what you'll find as a typical animal or typical plant. And why that's important is you could go into your store and you'll see an enzyme formulation. It's got protease, which breaks down protein, amylase, breaks down carbohydrates, lipase, which breaks down fats, maybe some cellulase or derivatives of cellulase, which breaks down plant material. You'll look at it, it's $20. And you'll see another enzyme there formulation around the same amount of capsules, something, and it's 80 or 100. And you're going, well, what's the difference between these? Generally, it's cultured enzymes. And that cultured enzyme usually will also work in a broader pH spectrum. Animal enzymes, for example, probably have the lowest efficacy. They only work in a very specific range. Plants are usually better, but oftentimes are not applicable, particularly around the proteins. They're not as great on that side of things, and that's where you'd want a cultured enzyme. So with our products, we use only cultured enzymes. We go through a very specific process, and we test these enzymes both in the efficacy for how well they work, but we've compared the analysis with virtually every other product on the market. And we're going to be releasing some groundbreaking data here in the new year. We're just waiting for publication out of our PhDs. And I think the industry is going to be shocked about what we were able to produce thanks to our lab team in Croatia, Birch International University, and all the geniuses over there, that I think we're going to turn the entire industry upside down. So I'm very confident about that and excited about that process.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, what products, are there any new products? I know you launched Collagenius, your collagen-based protein product, and also a new sleep system.
Yes.
Touch on those?
Yeah, so the Collagenius is a product that combines high levels of mushrooms. So we use a mushroom extract. So you're literally getting about 1.2 pounds of mushrooms in every serving. And when you're looking at the therapeutic effect of creating BDNF, BDNF is kind of like the fertilizer for brain growth in your cells. And
I call it miracle grow for your brain.
It really is. And collagen, of course, a lot of people are supplementing with collagen. And what we decided is, can we make a super potent combination of both collagen and mushroom extracts that people can feel, that you have a somatic effect from? Collagenius does that. You mix a couple of scoops up in the morning and drink this, there is a feeling that goes on in your body and your brain that you're going, wow. In fact, we have a whole company called Nutopia that makes cognitive enhancement products. This has become the go-to base product of all of that. People love it. It tastes great. You can mix it up, make a hot chocolate out of it. It's wonderful. You can just eat it out of the can. Some people just eat it like it's, candy, or you can stir it up in your regular shake. I think it's really, really great. And what's really interesting is over time, as you're using this, people report an heightened sense of mood and increase memory recall. And that's particularly, we have a lot of lion's mane in there. And those extracts have been shown to improve memory retention. And of course, we believe that over time, this is what will help prevent degenerative conditions that happen cognitively. And that's a big issue that's going on worldwide. Great product. People will love it. And of course, everything has a money back guarantee with BiOptimizers. So that's a great one. The sleep optimizer, my business partner, Matt, has struggled with sleep his whole life. He was one of those guys that sleep 9 hours and felt terrible after. And I'm one of those guys that slept 6 hours and felt great. So he invested about $50,000 in his sleep system. He's got a Faraday cage. He's got special mattresses. He's got cooling pads. He's got like devices that go on. I mean, it's really, really intense. And we were looking at what are the elements that allow people to get both deep sleep and REM sleep. And what's interesting is based on your neurochemistry, you need variances within that on an individual. So what happened in the sleep industry is most people was a one size fits all. Now, we created a sleep system. In other words, that you can dial up and regulate towards your own body's needs. And we worked this all out after, I don't know how many experiments. It was a lot over a long time. It was just like hundreds and hundreds of iterations. The sleep formula that we came up with, the base part, was 55 renditions to get the one that we've got. And it has, I would say, here's the strategy around improving the quality of your sleep. Number one, try not to eat within 3 hours before you go to bed. Food and alcohol disrupt your sleep over and above everything else. Number three, make sure that you get a high quality mattress, that you're not getting too much heat that's waking you up, and that your body is staying in a position that doesn't disrupt your spinal function. Okay, so that's the basics. The next thing, for most people, they're a little clocked up. So turning off their TVs and lights and things like that, their blue light stuff, their stimulation, an hour or two before they go to bed, good idea. Add a couple caps of magnesium. We get the world's best magnesium and magnesium breakthrough. That seems to down-regulate the body. Some probiotics like P3M will increase GABA. GABA is known to enhance your deep sleep. Those are the preliminary step before we get to the sleep formula that anybody can do.
Right.
The sleep formula, you take a serving size between 1 to 4 scoops of the powder, mix it up in water, drink it down before you go to bed. Within 30 minutes, you're going to find that you want to go to sleep. We also have a spray that goes with it, which has a small, a tiny amount of agents that enhance sleep. There's a little bit of melatonin in it. We don't recommend that you use that all the time, but it's great if you're traveling, or great if you aren't in a situation where you're not going to get a lot of sleep, or you're waking up in your sleep, a couple of sprays beforehand. Again, both of those need to be dialed up for your own individually. So start at 1 or 2 scoops, dial up, dial down, use a sleep tracking system. And then in the new year, we're going to be releasing a new product called BiOptimizers for people who like to do lucid dreaming and stuff like that. There's a formulation on that. So the idea is that you can self-modulate based on what's going on in your unique chemistry. And I think we're one of the few companies that have been able to do that. And it's a great product. And that most people who have taken it, and this is coming right out of, we released it at the Dave Asprey Bulletproof event, which is the geeks of geeks and tracking. Right. They're just coming back and saying, man, I doubled my REM sleep and I doubled my deep sleep. Well, doubling your deep sleep is a massive improvement in the quality. So it's not the duration of how much time you sleep. It's how much deep sleep is what's the regenerative process, as well as REM sleep, which is also good for clearing out the metabolites in your brain.
Absolutely. Well, you shared a wealth of knowledge with us, and thank you for the work you're doing and the products you and your business partner have created. Where can people find you most easily?
Yeah, great question. So I think we might have a special for you guys if I can pull it up. Let me see here. Yes, indeed. If you go to BiOptimizers.com and use BossBody10, you get a 10% discount on any of our products. Plus, there's volume discounts if you buy more. BiOptimizers.com. We do have the Awesome Health course, which we give away for free on the site, which is the foundational course that you can study to give your background and your basics and things like that. We do recommend that you do find a functional medicine doctor that can help you dial in your individuality. And when you start practicing these principles, there's also our book, Sick to Superhuman, kind of the 10 best biohacking components that you can go to. And we got our podcast at Awesome Health, Instagram, BiOptimizers, all that sort of stuff. And you can reach us out there. And of course, if you have any questions, reach out to our team. We're happy to answer any of them and get your feedback and your testimonials. We read them out every week on our team meetings, and people love it.
Yeah, I use the BiOptimizers, enzymes, the P3OM, the magnesium breakthrough. I've used the Capex and a few other products, and they all over deliver. And I think, to have a bodybuilder focusing on digestion the world needs more Wade Lightheart.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate having me on the podcast.
Absolutely. Well, hopefully we can have you on again in the future. Until then, happy holidays and be blessed.
Same to you, Tim.
All right.